Welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hey, Guthrie.
And we have a special guest today.
We do.
You wanna do it?
I'll do it. We
Okay.
have Kristen Gallagher. Kristen is a UX researcher in customer engagement at Google. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. So we met Kristen at just last month at UXPA, and Guthrie and I were there speaking, and we also taught a one-day workshop that Kristen was in. And we just kind of hit it off. We had a lot of fun talking together. And in particular, one of the things I know we're going to talk about, but it doesn't have to be all we talk about, but we were sitting at lunch, and Kristen started telling us about some, what do you call it? Ad hoc.
Kind of like
research or something. That's it. Guerrilla research. She had been doing or just doing, like that day, right? Or the day before.
Well, it was like that week or something.
Yeah.
It was that night. It was very fresh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, well, actually, what my memory is, we were sitting at lunch and you asked the table a question, and then we were all answering the question, and then you said, actually, I've been doing some guerrilla research on this. So, and then that's kind of where we left it, and we never got to find out what your guerrilla research showed. So that's what I hope we will reveal on the podcast today. Some of Kristen's guerrilla research, right?
Yeah.
All right. Before we get into that, though, can you tell us just a little bit about what you do at Google, like your official job?
Sure. So I have a background in working in mental health in the industry and as an addictions researcher. So it led me to UX research. And I started off at Google working in brand studio, which is just making sure the people that work for Google adhere to certain branding standards. But currently on my team in customer engagement, what I do is I work on a tool that helps customer service representatives diagnose and resolve customer issues.
But people never have customer issues with Google.
Technology, it should take care of itself, right?
All right. So then how did you, but you're doing this guerrilla research kind of on your own, on the side whatever.
Was this a project that was like a sort of encouraged by something, or is this separate from your job? Is this like sort of an ancillary thing you're doing sort of through your job?
Yeah, totally separate from my job. I think having a background in psychology, I've just always been very curious about people and how they navigate the world and the lens through which they see things. And I'm able to do that to some extent in my job, but that's, way more product oriented, and that feels a little bit more like work. So while I was at this conference, just before, my friends and I went to do a little road trip to the Grand Canyon. And we had this really beautiful conversation talking about where we were in life and where we wanted to be. And what was really fascinating was that a couple of us, when we said where we wanted to be, we were like, you're already that. You already are that. But we just didn't realize that. And it brought up the question of, when are we enough, and who gets to decide that? And, if we forget that we're enough, or when traveling, through the world or through life or experiences, sometimes we lose touch with that. How do we get that back? And so I started putting that question out on social media, asking, Lyft and Uber drivers, anyone that I came into contact with
the lunch table at UXPA.
Yeah, because people were having these, traditional small talk conversations of where do you work and, what are you working on, which is totally
you mean the questions I asked you when we started the podcast episode?
Exactly.
Okay, and you wanted to go into a deeper level.
Well, I just thought
You're curious.
Really, really fascinating, to be at a conference with UX researchers and designers and people that really think about the human experience and, we're always measuring success, how it is that we answer those questions and how we think about that. And yeah, it was just a really incredible opportunity to be at that lunch table and have that conversation with almost strangers, to pull into that really deep, personal, I don't know, like understanding of yourself and share it with others. So yeah, the questions that I asked people were, how do you know when who you are is enough? And what do you do to maintain and grow that sense of self-confidence?
Okay. So what happened when you asked all these people and when you put it out on social media? Do you have any conclusions?
I do. It's been absolutely fascinating. So I found a lot of differences between men and women.
Okay.
For women, when asking, how they know that who they are is enough and how they maintain and grow that feeling of self-confidence, they talked a lot about getting off of social media, how that was really damaging to their self-esteem, and surrounding themselves with really positive people. They're talking about their insecurities coming from people who bring them down or are negative. They were also talking about self-care and just being gentle and sweet to themselves. And then a couple of them, which I really enjoyed, were just sort of like, it's something that we're sort of entitled to. They said, just look, well, a direct quote was, look at the losers, who believe in themselves. So it was just kind of a funny way, one of the quotes where people were talking about kind of creating that sense of self-esteem, through avoiding social media or surrounding themselves with positive people, but then also just this ingrained sense of being enough just by being a human. And for men, they were saying, it's something you ultimately have to decide for themselves, that big changes were really hard and small changes were easy. So dividing big changes into smaller changes and talking about a strategic approach. But what I thought was really fascinating was that more men than women gave answers relating to not really focusing on that so much and sort of embracing like a fake it till you make it mentality. Believing in self-confidence and just continuing in that direction, just having this almost persona of a confident person and then doing what they would do. Yeah. So how does that
kind of like an inside out. I think of that as inside out.
Exactly.
Like it's like, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm a confident person. And by doing that, I'm going to become a confident person.
Yes. Yeah. And then some kind of went outside in. A quote that I really loved was, I just walk around with a stupid grin on my face a lot. After a while, you start to feel good if you didn't already. And if you did, you feel even better. It's a win-win.
I think I remember hearing about that when I was like in middle school or something, or elementary, where a teacher was like, just smile. And if you smile long enough, then you'll be in a good mood.
I've been tracking down research on that over the last couple of years, and the research is mixed on whether and the research actually had to do with physical postures and movements, and smiling is one of it, right? It changes the muscles in your face, but also being hunched over versus standing up straight, being standing with your legs further apart in a kind of a power stance, and they were and I can't remember off the top of my head who was doing this research. I know one of the people gave a TED talk in which she said this really, when you do these, when you change your muscles and your posture, it changes your emotional state and can bring on confidence or not, depending on the posture. But I just read that, and again, I apologize for not having this reference at hand, that there's some question about whether that's really true.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny you bring that up. I just, I just watched that TED Talk on Friday. Amy Cuddy talking about power
Yeah,
poses
Amy
and
Cuddy,
such.
thank you. But then
Yeah,
I just heard, I'm going to have to find who was it, some researchers that said, nah, maybe not.
right, right. It seems it's hard to replicate and it's not really conclusive. But I do think it's interesting, and I'm kind of curious if we can weave in a little social experiment to this podcast for
You're
the next.
always weaving
Sure.
in social
Weave
experiments.
away.
All
I
right,
have never
cool.
seen such an experiment weaver as Kristen. Okay, how are we going to weave in a social experiment into this podcast? Tell
All
us.
right. So for me in California, it's 8:20 right now. What if for the next 10 minutes we just have the conversation grinning? So we continue having the conversation, but very intentionally smile.
Okay.
Could we try that?
Yeah, I have a mirror
Perfect.
and I'll
Guthrie?
put it right in
I
front of me.
I am trying. It's sort of it's hard to talk
It's
and
easier.
smile
It
at the
is
same time.
easier with the mirror.
Okay.
I
When you're looking at I find it easier with the mirror because then you're looking at yourself and it's as though you were having a conversation with someone that's smiling.
mm,
Okay, so I don't know why we're doing this, but we're going to do it for 10 minutes. I'm going to clock 10 minutes. I'm watching
Perfect.
on my clock. And does that mean we can't talk about anything sad?
No, in fact, I would encourage that. I think that would
We
make it
are
even
going
more
to talk about
interesting.
something sad
We
while we're
can.
smiling?
Yeah.
I feel like a news anchor. Who, 'cause supposedly they have to deliver like sad news and even smile a little, although I don't think that's true.
I don't
All
know.
right, so tell us then, while we're taking this 10 minutes to talk, tell us what's your do you have a summary of that one little guerrilla research thing you did about when are you enough? How do you know when you're enough? Like, what was the summary?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say from that experiment, what I found most interesting was that there were differences between men and women and how they define that. So for women, it seemed like it was more oriented around social media and creating a positive community around them. And for men, it was more about, I kind of called it a survivalist perspective towards feeling like they were enough. So some of them were just kind of like not thinking so much about enough, just focusing on whatever they were doing, and this feeling that being human was enough, so they didn't need to prove themselves or quantify their worth in any way. And then also something that I really liked about, or something that I found really interesting about men's responses is that it was also very geared towards goals and very incremental improvements, opposed to women where it was just more about community and self-care. And then something that was really interesting when I did a survey and I split up those questions. So the first question being, how do you know when who you are is enough? A lot of people, had these ideas, and it ranged from their faith in God to feeling enough professionally to, I called it unsure or never being enough. And then there were some people, I would say the vast majority of it over the survey were saying that they define when they are enough. But what was really interesting, and I love this part, is the second question when they answered separately: how do you maintain and grow that feeling of self confidence? A lot of people came to the realization that they knew what they had to do to be enough, and they knew that they were the ones in control that defined it. But to grow and maintain that feeling of self confidence was something that they don't necessarily prioritize. That they
You mean
don't,
they don't make it a priority in their life? Is that what you mean?
yeah, almost like a New Year's resolution. Like they knew what they needed to do, but in terms of actually maintaining and growing that feeling, they're like, I know I need to do this. I know I need to do that. One person even said that they that this question inspired them to find a therapist, and that they reached out before answering this question. So I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I would say in summary, there was a difference between men and women and how they go about feeling like they're enough. What was interesting between the two was that when they were able to define it, they did notice an inconsistency in their ability to take action towards that.
So I have questions and comments on different tangents, and so I have to stop and say, which path should I follow? All right, I'll follow this path for the moment. So I'm assuming that there would be some fairly large cultural differences in this, not just in terms of perhaps cultural differences in whether there are differences in the gender responses everywhere, but also cultural differences in the responses in general. Because I'm assuming most of the people you were talking to were living in the U.S. Is that true?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what kind of makes this study, in quotes, I suppose, because it was so biased in that way.
Yeah, it was
like
people
it was,
you were
right.
Well,
into.
you don't have like $10,000 to do.
No.
Yeah.
Right,
no, but if anyone wants to give her $10,000 to do the research, she'd probably take it. No, I'm just thinking, Guthrie, I'm thinking about when we our own very limited guerrilla research, really limited. Do you remember when we were in Sweden a couple of years ago and we asked the people there, what did we ask them?
It was like what are it was more work centric, but it was like what are what are the qualities and values that you believe are that a successful worker or a good employee or like someone you aspire to be at work are like at the office, who are the best, everyone kind of knows who the best hotshot, the golden childs at the office are. And it's like, what are the qualities that they have?
Yeah, what are the qualities that make someone, a good person you want to work with?
That's a better way of
I
saying
think it
what
was,
I was trying to say, which is not, which
I think we
poorly.
phrased it something like that.
Oh,
and the answers were different than.
So hold on. Well, I will ask you the question. What are the good qualities of not people you want to work with, but also make it that you think other people really like.
Yeah. And you're asking Kristen, I assume,
yes.
Right? All right. So what do you say, Kristen? What are the qualities that make a human a good person to work with, or that you think other people would say would make a person good to work with?
Interesting. We've done a little research on Google on this, and one of the things that I found surprising that was one of the highest contributors of whether someone was enjoyable to work with was whether they were considered to be a safe person, like whether you could trust them and feel safe around them to share your ideas, that you could trust them to, not turn their back on you in a meeting, to encourage some of your ideas, but also give you honest feedback, so that they were a trustworthy and safe person to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And anything else that you think people would answer, or anything that what would you answer?
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me personally, something that's important to me is working with someone that can make me better. I like to think of it sort of like basketball. Like, you don't get better by playing with people that are at your level. You get better by playing with people that have more skills than you in a different direction. So for me, I really enjoy working with people that really value continual improvement on their craft and share their learnings with others.
Is that it?
I think positive people too. Yeah, I think humor is important also.
So, so if there was someone at work and they only come in to work about 6 hours a day, that would be okay? Everyone, no one would kind of bat an eye about that?
Interesting. And all of their work is completed?
Let's do first, all their work is completed, and second, all their work is not completed?
Yeah, I think in this, digital age, it's so common for people to work remotely, and there are people in the office that I see very rarely because
they
they're
don't work
traveling.
from home.
So okay,
No, he meant
No,
they're
no, no.
just not
They
working
work
very
6
much.
hours a day,
they're only working 6 hours.
but they're
a
very
day.
positive.
Yeah, it's hard to really separate that from whether or not they're like meeting the needs. I think how much time that they do the work is, because there's someone that could spend 13 hours and a day and not get the same amount done as someone in 3 hours. So I think it depends for me if they're carrying their load, less so the hours that they're actually in the office.
Well, so one of the things that we found, or at least in my experience I found, and asking some people, it's the same thing. There in the US, there's like this really, really weird, it's kind of like, it's like no one wants to talk about it, but it like exists in the ethos. There are a couple other examples in society and culture that I guess you could talk about, that like no one wants to bring up. Like, so for example, no one would say that it's important for them to work with someone they find attractive. And yet everyone would much prefer to work with someone they find attractive.
Really?
Well, maybe not, but I don't know. I have a suspicion. It's just a hunch. I mean, again, this is just anecdotal. And the second thing is, at least for Americans, it seems like hard work and effort is very, very important to success, or at least the appearance of hard work and effort. So if you're the person who comes in late every day and you leave early and you take an hour and a half for lunch and you're always taking breaks and chit-chatting with other people, that sort of person is generally frowned upon in the workplace by everyone. And there does seem to be this like competition of whoever is the hardest worker at the office is generally pretty well regarded. I think that's safe to say. Like, everyone knows who's like goes above and beyond and is like putting in extra time and is just like taking other people's work. And I mean, I don't know, maybe Google's different. I used to work in a logistics company that was like a very, very fast-paced, intense environment. And maybe it was more pronounced there. But certainly there is this, like, whoever the hardest working person is that's like a good quality to have. And it sort of goes almost without saying.
Interesting. Did you, was this just individuals in the UX industry that you were speaking with? Or
No, this was probably not
wider.
even users in the UX industry, but I'm sure there were some of them.
Interesting. Because you were talking about how it's so important to be perceived as doing a lot of hard work. But I feel like there's this very recent conversation that is being discussed, definitely at Google, but I'm sure in other places too, about work-life balance and not glorifying the person that's, returning emails at 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah. Well, this was a couple years ago too. Before
interesting. Okay.
this was maybe in vogue.
This was, yeah. Although I'm always wondering if people are talking a good game about work and life balance, but not like living work-life balance.
Because I just have a feeling that if you had a good work-life balance and you came into work late often and you did what you were supposed to. I mean, the reality is that most people do way more than what their like job description says they're supposed to do. Like, there's like that part, but then there's not enough people on the project and they end up doing X. Like, they're supposed to only do X and Y, and they end up, their daily life is X, Y, Z, and N, and B, and C, and all this other stuff. But if you just like came in and put in your time and just did what you were supposed to and did good work and then just left, I feel like you would not be like the person on the promotion radar. Like, you're not the person that the bosses are like, yeah, this, we need to like empower this person.
All right. So first of all, I'm going to interrupt because can we stop smiling now?
Yes. I was actually going to mention that.
Thank you. Because it's really hard to do that. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to mention, Guthrie, about what you just said, is that there's also a tendency, or at least this used to be true, maybe it's not true anymore, that the really, really hardworking people are not the ones who get promoted in some companies, because you don't want to lose that person.
Right. That
You know,
happens as well.
so the really, really, the person who's like, you know, taken on everything that is falling through cracks and is just kind of killing themselves may not get promoted. I just wanted to mention that. But okay, Guthrie, can you mention about how we found the answers were different in Sweden?
Well, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, because this was a while ago, so I don't know if I exactly remember. So like the number one answer when we asked in Sweden to a giant room of people, and everyone sort of nodded in agreement, and was like, they like wrote it down, and basically the top answer for almost everyone was modesty, and not being braggadocious about your work.
Yeah,
not
being humble.
Being humble.
Humility, I think, was the word that they used too.
And let me give you the perfect sort of example of where like the rubber actually meets the road. We do workshops all the time, and a lot of them are in corporate settings, right? So like the workshop you did with us, we were at a conference, and so there was like, you weren't in your job, but imagine we came into your office at Google and we did the workshop there, right? So it was lunchtime, and they had sort of catered in lunch, with like so like right outside the room we were in, they had plates, and they brought in the food, and so
really, really good food, by the way.
Yeah, really good food. And so we grabbed some food, and we went and we sat down at our desk in the training room, and we just started eating lunch, kind of by our laptops.
As we always do.
Yeah, as we always do, and we were just chit-chatting and checking email or two, and we look up, and the entire room is empty, and these are people from different companies. This was at a it wasn't a conference. It was a private thing, but it was different companies. It wasn't all one company, I think. Was that true?
Right. So yes, and it was at a hotel, so it's not like they had all gone back to their desk to work.
Well, so what happened is that, but they had desks. They had their laptops up at each little station.
They did.
And everyone they had taken their plate. They had found a bunch of tables in like a hallway, and like pushed them together so that they could have like a communal lunch. And the entire lunch, it was like a full hour. No one checked any of the emails all day long. And there wasn't like, oh, we got to go. Like when we do conferences in the States, if there's like a lunch that's in-house, everyone sits at their desk and eats and works.
Yeah, or they bring their lunch into the meeting room, and then they open their laptop and they check their email, or they make a phone call, and they may socialize a little bit with the other people there.
Socialize a lot, but they're definitely
but they're also
their
doing some work. So Guthrie and I realized no one was in the room, and we kind of looked at each other, and then we got up to see where everyone was, and we
you don't do lunch where you work.
You do not do lunch. You go
have lunch.
Out to have lunch with other people.
So like the idea of eating lunch in the same room that you were doing work was like a foreign concept.
Really foreign to them. Yeah, they would not do that. So they were having their lunch, which meant and they were out there for the full hour.
Wow.
And then when it was time, when the hour was up, then they came back in the room for quote work.
So when they say that, like, because I've seen Americans don't say that hard work is number one, and yet I found, especially, and maybe again it's changing, but I've found that people who are like very responsive to emails, always like work available, doing a lot of stuff, getting into the office early. Like these are the types of people who, I don't know, command respect for some reason.
Are valued.
Are valued, and like
yeah, I don't think I would be surprised if humble and modest came up as the number one on the list of qualities for Americans would say. So I mean, and I'm assuming that there, other parts of the world you'd get different answers too. I think it would be really, interesting cross culturally to check that. But Kristen, tell us about another. Have you done other guerrilla researchers besides the How Do You Know You're Enough? Are there any others that you want to share with us?
I have, yeah. And I just want to wrap up. That is fascinating. I am so curious about learning more about the cultural differences between, work ethic and stuff. I love that.
Well, I mean, I should also say, I mean, do you work in the Valley? Are you at the main Google headquarters or something, or a close harmony? Yeah. So, I mean, I mean,
that's its own geographical region. Is
yeah. It's Silicon Valley. Like it's always got its own like its own thing going on. I mean, Google itself and all the Silicon Valley companies, they talk a big game about work-life balance, and they have we have like cold brew coffee at our workstations and only the nicest snacks and slides and stuff. But like the burnout rate for those companies is really high. And traditionally, the turnover has been pretty tough. So, I mean, maybe, so I think Silicon Valley always has its own unique culture and its own unique challenges. And perhaps what you're seeing is ahead of the curve, I'll say.
I'm actually leading a discussion on Thursday for a group offsite on work-life balance, and we're going to share like life hacks and tips about how we maintain work-life balance. So it's a very active conversation. I think within Google, but certainly within my team, not as a reactive, effort, but just more preventative. Just like always keeping it in the discussion. They just really want individuals to be satisfied with their work and just like their holistic view of their life, and work is an important part of that. So I think it's extremely important, and I am very grateful that it's a conversation that we're having at Google, and one that I get to lead this week.
I mean, it's I don't know if you think that do you think that that it can get to a healthy place? I mean, part of the problem I just feel is that there is work. So Sweden has a really, really big history of, you'll find this interesting, of trade unions. It's very, very, very strong there. So like almost a lot of professions, and if you're Swedish and I'm getting this wrong, please yell at me. But
yeah, let us know. And I know we have some people from Sweden that listen to our podcast.
But so the trade unions are really strong. So a lot of industries, a lot of the pay, like what standard pay is actually negotiated between companies and the national trade unions. So
wow,
yeah, it's this whole thing, and it's so
if you're if you have a certain job, it's not that your company is, this is my understanding, Guthrie. Yeah. It's not that your company is negotiating with the union in that company for what the wages and benefits are. Those are negotiated at a national level.
Yeah, it's
for
like
everyone
it's the
who
National
does that work.
Guild of Welders or something.
Yeah.
And within, there's definitely variance. So if you're a good welder, you can get paid a little more, but sort of the bounds of what's expected is sort of set by the trade unions. But it makes there is a sort of a very historical sort of guild approach to work, which is, I think, different than the sort of the American model. So because of that, there is, I think, a bit more of an idea, bit more of a feeling that when you join a company, like you're joining like a fraternal order, and you're like you know it's about work, but it's also like you have like there's like this whole kind of cultural like aspect, and you're in the group now. And
But I think they need to belong, right?
yeah, well, whereas in the United States, there is just corporate pressure to maximize profits and grind people, and like there's just a lot of pressure for people to work really, really, really hard because that's what you do.
Okay, and I think we have to not forget that there are in other countries besides the U.S., and Sweden is one of them. You start with this assumption. For instance, in Sweden, Guthrie, when we were there, which was 2 years ago, they said the amount of required vacation time by law is what is it?
I think the minimum amount of vacation a job can provide its employees, I think, is 5 weeks. Maybe it might be 6.
Yeah. And that was and they told us
most
that
people
was
get 8 or 9.
The minimum that most people would get like 8. You know, if you'd been there a while, and then you'd get more than 10, that. Yeah. But you have to get 5.
5 weeks vacation.
And so if we're talking about work-life balance, like it's like, let's talk about the starting point. Because it's one thing. It's one thing to try and put together work-life balance.
And a year for maternal and paternal leave.
A year for
paid.
Right. A paid year for leave. So it's, I think that when we talk about work-life balance here in the U.S., we're starting from this huge deficit. We're starting from a place in which it's kind of like it's like you're scrabbling to try and get any, rather than, I mean, Kristen, think about, you're leading this discussion, you said on Thursday. Think about how different the discussion would be if it were required by law that everybody at Google had to have 5 weeks vacation.
Why doesn't Google give 7 weeks vacation?
I'm not sure.
Right?
Maybe they do in Sweden.
But I just think it's a different conversation.
Right? Yeah.
When you have these, any of those basics in place. Anyway, I tell you, after we were in Sweden, the last time we were there for like what, 3 weeks or something?
Like a month or something. It was a while.
Yeah, I think we were ready to just stay. You could have talked me into just staying,
but
with everything we were finding out.
So I think part of the work-life balance is because with the internet and working from home, there has been an encroachment onto the home space from the office that for a lot of people in the past they don't think existed, and so there's a sort of a urge to return to the natural order of things, which is you go to work, and then you kind of when you're home you don't, but that's still there. That still is much less. I mean, in France, by law, everyone has to work a 35-hour work week, and what?
You go ahead.
Yeah, and they can't go over that.
Yeah, you can't go over 35 hours. I mean, I can't. I mean,
in France, by law, you cannot require someone to read or answer emails when they're after hours.
Now, what's fascinating, and I should tell you as well, is when you talk to Europeans and you say, "Hey, who are like the hardest working employees?" People are like, "Oh, the Swedish, the Germans, the Swedish, the Finnish." Like it's so even with their 6 weeks of vacation, 8 weeks of vacation, they're considered like some of the hardest working. Like, oh man, they're at work all the time. Wow. So. So I mean, there is this, for whatever reason, the American work culture has become sort of a cult of like, you're at work all the time.
Well, and I think part of it,
interesting.
You mentioned about the internet and the ability to easier and easier to work from home, or not even work from home. I mean, easier and easier to work while you're driving, while you're waiting to pick up your kids from softball practice or whatever it is because of, mobile devices. And also, I think the other issue, that we can't ignore is that the habitual nature of the devices. So that even if you don't want to be working and you don't want to be checking your work emails or anything else, part of you doesn't want to, but then it's a habit to keep looking. And so it may not even be that it's required. It may just be that you're now in the habit of always working.
Right. It's kind of like friction. I guess, 20 years ago, before, using the internet so much professionally, it seems like if you wanted to do work on a weekend, you'd have to go into the office and, make it very intentional. But nowadays you could just, pick up your phone or take your laptop to a coffee shop. And there's less of a barrier between, work and the rest of your life.
Although I think people, years ago, pre-internet, they brought a lot of work home.
Okay.
I think that's probably see what you have to remember, not as though I remember this, because certainly 20 years ago, I was not working. I was just a toddler.
You were just a toddler,
but,
yeah.
But I do want to kind of set the record straight on this, because I think there is this idea that this whole phenomenon of working all the time is new, and it's not new. But what is different is that you had to literally bring things home. Like you would, this is, people used briefcases, right? Or backpacks, and they would pack in there files and notes and paper.
Like you would
reports. They'd lug home big reports.
Well, so you would take home like the notes from a meeting and like transcribe the meeting into like summaries.
Yeah, you would. Please do remember that pre-internet there were computers, right? So the computers would be, and we're talking about in the 1980s, the 1990s. The computers would be. You'd get these gigantic printouts. Okay. Think of all the data you look at.
Can you replicate the noise that those printers made?
Okay, like that. And then, so you'd have this, was that pretty good?
And then you have to rip off the sides with the little holes on them.
Yeah, so you'd have this big stack of stuff, and you'd have to, you got to like analyze that. You got to look through it. You got to make decisions from it. That's not all being made for you. And so you'd take this big piece of paper and you'd stick it in your briefcase or your backpack, and you would take it home. And then while at home, you would work on it. You'd think about it. You'd make notes about phone calls you were going to make and that kind of thing. So I think what is different is, you had to, and it was intentional. Although there's always the possibility of just sitting down and getting pen and paper and thinking up, it's like, okay, I have a meeting next week. What do I want to talk about? Right. Mm-hmm. So I think people did a lot of work at home, but I think that what's different now is that, they can do it anywhere, not just at home. They can, see, I think it's more insidious, because I think it's one thing to go into a room or sit at your kitchen table and say, I'm going to do some work now. And I think it's different to be watching a movie with your kids, but you're not. Because you're on your phone reading emails and answering emails. Like that's worse, because that's not only encroaching on the time, it's doing the divided attention. And then what happens is you feel guilty that you're not spending time with your family, and you feel guilty that you're not working.
Right.
It's like you're just in constant guilt mode, because it's always there. But
right. And I imagine
Yeah.
that's especially relevant to women right now. There was like this maternal employment war from, 20 years ago, where it's like working mothers and how does that affect their relationship with children? And now it's more common that there are, dual income households and who's taking care of the kids and how do you balance that as a mother?
All right, we only have a few minutes left. Tell us about one other type of guerrilla research you've done.
Sure. So a recent one I did was, what are the lies you tell yourself? And is there anything in your mind that you know is logically untrue, but you tell yourself anyway?
Okay, she's really dangerous, Guthrie. I don't know that we want to have too many conversations with her. She's going to ask really tough questions. What are the lies you tell yourself? And what was the second part?
So sort of as a clarifying, is there anything in your mind that you know is logically untrue, but you tell yourself anyway? And I'm very curious if you can guess the findings for men and women and how they differed.
Jeepers.
And there's a lot. There's a lot of lies.
Okay. All right. So
what do you think are some of the most common for men?
Oh my God. I have no idea.
Can you just repeat the question?
What are the lies you tell yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And what is something that you logically know is untrue, but you tell yourself it anyway?
Okay. I'm going to guess that men tell themselves that they're above average, like looking, or above average athletically or something, even though they know that that's not true.
Yep. So there's about 10 for men, and that is one of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Got it.
You got any others, Guthrie? You got 9 more guesses about the men.
Are there other similar variations on that theme where basically men are they know that they're less than like perfect, but in some capacity, but like on work or is that
just this idea that they're above average. Kind of like a Stuart Smalley or something. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me kind of mentality. I would say that is kind of a category in its own, but there are quite a few more that are, I would say, less positive.
That you said were what?
Less positive.
Less positive. Oh, okay. That's a good hint.
I'm going to guess one for the women.
Oh, okay.
That they're happy. They're happy with their life.
Yeah, one of my favorite verbatims was, "I'm enjoying all aspects of motherhood," which is really interesting.
We would know that's not true. Anyone who's ever been a mother would know that was not true. But that's what they tell themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that could cover a lot, right? Like, I'm happy with my boyfriend. I'm happy with my, I guess you said motherhood. I'm happy with like whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for men, it was really interesting. Some of the findings that they lies that they told themselves were around, I'm not lonely, there's someone for everyone. Health-related ones, like I'll return to working out, I'll quit drinking. And then some kind of sort of productivity lies that they tell themselves, like I don't need to write that down. I don't need help with insert anything.
That's the I don't need the manual category. I got it. I can figure it out.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm not vulnerable.
Yeah.
All right, what were some of the other?
What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead. What were you saying, Kristen?
I was saying, Guthrie, what do you think are some of the lies that women tell themselves?
Oh God.
Yeah.
Come on, man, you're really.
I told you she's really tough.
She's asking to get me in trouble. I actually think
Yeah, go ahead, Guthrie. Nobody's listening.
Yeah, go ahead. Summarize women for us. I think the lie that I'm happy I think that's a really good one. Like I have a number of I mean, you probably have friends like this too, who like, that they have an acrimonious relationship, and
Yes.
they're fighting and like they're huffing and like they're like maybe not always miserable with each other, but like they're definitely not like this like fairy tale whatever. And all they post on Instagram is like 2 years since the day, and it's like pictures of their wedding, and it's like oh my god, life partner, best brunch ever, and it's just like lovey-dovey, like we're like this perfect relationship. That's all their Instagram is, and you sort of know it's like a lie, but it's almost like they're not doing it to make I've always felt they don't do it to make other people, that they don't do it to convince other people that they have a happy relationship. They're doing it to like convince themselves.
Oh, absolutely. There's this one great quote that I love, and it's, "You're not who you think you are. You're not who other people think you are. You're who you think other people think you are." And I think they're trying to grow that. And you're absolutely right. A common theme that we found in women were lying to themselves about how happy they are or could be in relationships. Some of my favorite verbatims were, "He's not a narcissist. It will work out. You're overthinking, overanalyzing. And that I can love someone into loving me right." And I thought those were really powerful.
Yeah. No, it's he's a really good guy. Like I know, like sometimes he's like X or Y, but that's not who he is.
Yeah. So anyway, those were some of the interesting lies that people told themselves. There were some more happy ones, telling themselves that they were going to start working out or eating right tomorrow, and
Wait,
they were
why is that happy? That's sad, because that's a lie to themselves.
Well,
they're not going to do that.
I think they're realizing that it's, change isn't as immediate as we would all hope. So it's like in the direction opposed to just this kind of like delusional optimism.
All right, now, Kristen, why did you want us to smile for 10 minutes?
I was really curious how it would affect the conversation. I've read some studies about, interviews or customer service representatives, and when they smile throughout the conversation without being seen, and how that content changes opposed to just keeping a neutral face. And I was curious how that would take this conversation. I didn't really have a hypothesis, but I was
So now
interested.
we have to go back and analyze what we said.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm going to go back and
when I smiled, I felt happier.
You did?
Yeah.
All right. You want to know something I found when I was smiling, but maybe it was because I was looking in the mirror.
Well, now hold on.
What?
When you help me get the brain science of this right.
Yeah.
When you have like the mental image of what you look like, but when you see it in a mirror, it's reversed? Or does that mean are you seeing it because something like, I remember like if you see it and they flip the image and then it looks like a stranger because it's not what you're expecting. Maybe the mirror is what you're expecting, so you think you're looking at yourself, but then if you flip it.
Yeah, but you got to remember, I spend hours and hours and hours looking at videos of myself when we do our video.
No,
editing.
that's what I say, right? So is the mirror the same as the videos, or is that the inverse, or is it like flipped?
No, the mirror is the same as the
same as the videos. Okay, so you're used to that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if that would affect. That's interesting. It might, or maybe it would affect me more if I didn't.
I think it's if you take like they take like the picture of, like, you take a picture of someone, but
and
then
you flip it.
When you flip it, and that's actually what you look like to other people, but then it looks like your brain is like, who's the stranger? Because we're not perfectly symmetrical. Something like that.
I think it's also
that's
interesting
not
to
the
smile.
case here.
I think it's interesting to smile throughout a conversation in person as well as, over the phone. Because even when I suggested that, you're like, can we talk about sad things? And it feels like if you force yourself to smile, the likelihood of you talking about negative things or complaining just feels sort of inconsistent with your face.
It does.
And then same thing with interacting with people. If you just walk around with a smile, you're more approachable. it almost feels like they would be doing you a disservice by bringing down something negative if you're smiling. So I don't know, I'm kind of curious about that space ever since asking people if they were enough. And then some of the response is just kind of saying this approach to life where you just sort of smile and it reflects back at you.
I found when I was smiling into the mirror today, it made it hard for me to think.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I could, my mental faculties were like dimmed.
Right.
It's very odd. I'm going to have to, now I'm going to have to ponder that one. And it might have to do with, being an introvert versus being an extrovert. Like it's a lot of work for me to be extroverted. And I consider smiling and being, why are you laughing, Guthrie?
You're
smiling
so funny.
Why?
Well, because because you are, while you are an introvert, you are a very like loud and outgoing person.
In a good way.
Yeah, but like you like being on stage.
Yeah, I like being on
you
stage.
Like exuding energy.
I like giving speeches. I like talking on podcasts.
But it's just so weird that that's the route you chose. Because like I'm an extrovert, so like when I'm talking to people or when I'm like meeting new people, like it's energetic and I have a really fun time. And so it's like why you would pick a profession where like the only thing you do is like really hard and draining. I don't quite understand that.
I chose you, Susan. We follow you.
I don't understand it either. I don't understand it. It's
because you really enjoy it.
I enjoy what?
Being in front of people.
I do. I love being on stage and giving talks and teaching classes. It's extremely fun. But but I do also find it, tiring, right? But see, what I tell people is, like, I remember I would say to people, "Oh, I'm an introvert," and they like I used to do. I don't do as much anymore, but I used to do a lot of community theater, right? I mean, I'd be on the stage, I'd have the leading role, right? And then I would mention being an introvert, and people would say, "How can you be an introvert? You're on stage." And it's like, yeah, but I'm not on stage as me. I'm on stage playing a part. I can do that. I don't know. Maybe Kristen can analyze this for us and come back and give me some psychoanalysis about this juxtaposition of being an introvert but liking to be on stage. So I don't have an answer, but it is true. I am an introvert. I like people. I like talking to people, but it is not the easiest thing for me to do. As Guthrie will attest, as whenever we're at a conference and it's time to schmooze, he says, "Okay, let's go schmooze." And I say, "Oh no, do we have to go schmooze?" So, but see, I really enjoy one-on-one, deep conversations. So, Kristen, when we sat at lunch and got talking about your research, like then I have no problem. And that, I'm interested in talking about that. So there's something about the crowd versus one-on-one. So there you have it. We can now analyze Susan Weinschenk. Kristen, this has been so much fun, and I knew that we would get you on and the time would just like fly and we wouldn't have enough time to talk about everything, which was true. I hope you will stay in touch with us and let us know more about your guerrilla research as you go along.
Is there
Absolutely.
Is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Smiling. I think I don't have any specific agenda. I think I don't know if there's anything to plug. I think it's just kindness to other people. So yeah, spotlight for that.
Nice thing to plug.
Yeah, no, this has been so much fun. It's always so incredible, talking to you guys. I remember throughout the conference, any time I spent talking to you, I was always just, left with really fascinating things to ponder. So I really appreciate being on this podcast and having the opportunity to just kind of explore some of these ideas with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we were glad to have you. All right, Kristen, Guthrie, thanks a lot. Guthrie, if people want to reach us, how do they reach us?
Yeah, you can oh my god, you can email info@theteamw.com.
And I'm just going to ask if you like the podcasts that we do, the episodes that we do, please do review us or write a review at whatever your podcast listening software or app is. That really helps us get the word out to more people.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone, and I guess we'll wrap up.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.